Welcome to the Book Faire podcast. My name is Anthony, and this week we have a conversation about representation in media. A look at Florida's announcement to end mandatory vaccine requirements for public schools. Canada joins the book ban race and faces immediate backlash, and a ban on cell phones in public schools led to a surge in library visits. We'll also be looking at new releases, but first, let's talk about representation and what it means. On January 10th, 2025, a woman posted a video to TikTok that melted the hearts of viewers and anime fans.
He's cool looking?
Yeah, because he has white hair and the red hair.
White hair and red hair? What eyes does he have?
Blue eye and gray eye.
Uh-huh. Anything else you think's cool?
And he has a birthmark like me.
He does.
So he's not to me.
A young girl holds a plushie. He has a birthmark like me. The internet exploded over this girl's fondness for an anime character. And that character's name is not as important as what happens next. She saw something inside of this little toy, the way his face mirrored her own. A commenter puts it best, saying, "This is why representation matters in the world. Everyone deserves to feel loved and accepted. And this is a perfect example of that." A large birthmark like hers is something that children might pick on in school, and it can be the source of low self-esteem. I'm not trying to pathologize her. I'm not saying that this is what she feels or will go through. But these are factors that are present in all children and adults. Maybe your smile isn't what you want, or your body doesn't feel quite right. Internalized criticisms of your identity or your body can be affirmed by comments other people make. That is why representation matters. Everyone deserves to feel accepted and loved. When a book chooses to leave a character's ethnicity ambiguous, or a cartoon makes an unconscious decision to only have able-bodied characters, these things can reinforce normative ideas of what society looks like. I personally grew up reading Goosebumps by R.L. Stine. I loved those books. And a common critique of Stine's writing style is that he always describes characters' clothes. This is an example of what I mentioned earlier, with characters being ethnically ambiguous. Characters had clothes, hairstyles, and of course names to tell them apart. Otherwise, they were just normal. And as I got older and learned to critically read, looking back at those characters and books, normal became another word for white. That isn't entirely R.L. Stine's doing. Something inside of me was ignoring my own Hispanic heritage, and this was reinforced by characters in media. Movies, books, and shows were often homogeneous, showing a majority white cast. The greater conversation of internalized racism and bias in writing is another and more advanced conversation. But here, let's talk simply about representation. Similar to having characters written with ambiguous descriptions or skin tones, representation can be implied. Implicit and explicit representation is the difference between a character declaring their nationality or their religion in a piece of media, or characters written with intent to represent some group without outright saying it. Implicit representation can be in the form of a character like Entrappa from She-Ra and the Princess of Power, a neurodivergent character that struggles with social situations. When asked on Twitter about Entrappa, one of the creators said yes, she was intentionally written as autistic. She was given dialogue and arcs throughout her appearances that viewers on the spectrum would be able to connect with, even if it was never explicitly stated. Another form of implicit representation comes after the fact. When a character is not written to be a member of a group, but that group or fandom collectively agrees that they are a part of it. One of the most famous examples of a black-coded character is Piccolo from the anime Dragon Ball Z. Black fans of the show have collectively claimed Piccolo, even though he is an alien and is not black. Another example comes from a suggestion on Discord. I asked for examples of representation in media, and a user mentioned Tony Stark from a specific Iron Man cartoon released in the 90s. The way he was designed made him appear Latin American, despite nothing in the character's design, background, or dialogue confirming it. They said growing up Hispanic and seeing a superhero that reflects them, even if unintentionally, hit them hard. And to this day, the show is still really important to them. All in all, representation is a universally good thing, right? Well, it's hard to talk about representation in children's media without addressing the big red elephant in the room. On the Book Faire podcast, we've covered many stories about book bans for the simple fact of including LGBTQ+ characters. A common talking point among far-right people is that trans people are being shoved down our throats. A majority of books, movies, TV shows, and video games still predominantly depict heteronormative characters and relationships. Trans characters in media come up so rarely that trans-coded characters are often enough for people to latch onto, either as a member of the trans community or someone that opposes trans rights. Spider-Gwen in the movie Across the Spider-Verse had some trans pride flag colors that many people interpreted to mean that she may have been intended to be trans in the story or at some point in the development of the movie. The inclusion of a poster that says "Protect Trans Kids" is at best evidence of allyship, but nothing was ever confirmed by the animators, director, or writers of the movie. This didn't stop people on both sides claiming Gwen as a trans icon. For people in the LGBTQ+ community, it affirms them and promotes acceptance. For the other side, it promotes acceptance, which they will argue is bad. Acceptance is the ultimate point. Going back to the comment, everyone deserves to feel accepted and loved. While the political climate around trans rights is rocky, I will always advocate for more representation so that LGBTQ+ people feel safe and welcome, and that includes trans kids. A book we've covered here, The Girls of Skylark Lane by Robin Benway, includes a 12-year-old trans girl. The book itself is about twins who move into a new neighborhood and join a girls' softball team to pass the time. The trans character's identity is only a topic of conversation for a couple of pages. Girl Mode, a graphic novel written by Magdalene Visaggio, follows a 17-year-old trans girl who has recently come out and starts a new school year as her true self. Both of these books offer different views into trans characters and how they are written. Girl Mode focuses heavily on the experience of a trans character and is written by a trans woman. The Girls of Skylark Lane simply has a trans character as part of the cast, and honestly, most of the time, that's enough. When a movie, show, or book pauses to acknowledge that there are people in the world outside of the strict gender binary, or white or American, those stories are making a conscious effort to reflect the real world, that we are not all the same. Take a second, step aside, and let another culture share in the spotlight. With all of that said, there is one other aspect of representation to talk about, and that is the negative side, with caricatures and stereotypes. When diverse groups or characters are removed from the actual communities, we step away from authenticity and into disrespectful territory. That doesn't mean that white and cis authors can only ever write white and cis characters, not at all. It means that when they are present, the author needs to authentically represent the communities those characters are a part of. A perfect example of how a group of people can be misrepresented in media comes from the Looney Tunes, with Speedy Gonzales and his cousin, Slowpoke Rodriguez. Debuting in 1955 and voiced by the legendary Mel Blanc, Speedy Gonzales is the fastest mouse in all of Mexico. He was undoubtedly a mix of racist stereotypes and an ethnically insensitive accent by Blanc. Speedy's cousin, Slowpoke Rodriguez, was similarly a combination of stereotypes and also voiced by a white man. The reception of these two characters reflects the intent behind them. Where Speedy Gonzalez is the fastest mouse in all of Mexico, his cousin Slowpoke Rodriguez was called the laziest mouse in all of Mexico. Ultimately, both characters were pulled from airing on TV around the 90s, as executives at Warner Brothers recognized the harmful stereotypes baked into them and their cartoons. However, a common sentiment behind Speedy Gonzalez is overwhelmingly positive, especially in Mexico. The difference between Speedy and his cousin is that he is a hero and highlights the positive sides of Mexican culture. The continuing support from fans led to Speedy Gonzalez returning to TV in reruns of Looney Tunes, as well as in the 2000s animated series with a slightly toned-down accent, and even in the new Space Jam movie, voiced by comedian Gabriel Iglesias. Iglesias, in a stand-up special, even advocated for returning to Speedy's original voice, instead of playing it as himself. Gabriel Iglesias' performance pays homage to legendary voice actor Mel Blanc while embracing the character. He said, quote, "Speedy Gonzalez was not viewed in a negative way. As a matter of fact, he was the only form of representation we had growing up." End quote. All of this is to say that representation matters. Characters that authentically and respectfully reflect cultures helps to empower young audiences. Our world is multicultural, our country is diverse, and we all deserve a chance to see ourselves in the movies we watch and the books we read. The inclusion of characters that reflect 10%, 20%, or even just 1% of the population carries weight. The argument that one group is being overrepresented or one group is being completely eclipsed by another is patently absurd. Studies have been done about children's books, with one in 2019 from the Children's Book Center found that 12% of books added to their collection that year were written by or about BIPOC authors. In 2020, a separate study found 11% of children's books had an author or illustrator of color, and only 7 books had a main character of color. Here on the Book Faire podcast, I choose to highlight noteworthy and diverse releases. Every week, anywhere from 5 to 20 books can be released. And if I cover a few that are written by Hispanic, Asian, Black, or queer authors, doesn't mean that those are the only books being released or that they are in any way superior. My goal is to uplift and highlight diverse voices and interesting stories that reflect the world that I live in. With all of that in mind, let's take a look at some new releases out this week. But first, if you appreciate the work being done on the Book Faire podcast, there are a number of ways you can show your support. First, you can like, comment, or subscribe wherever you're currently listening. Second, you can go to patreon.com/thebookfair to find episodes posted early, as well as links to news sources used throughout the show. You can also follow on Blue Sky at BookFairPod. However, the best way to help the podcast is simply by sharing it with a friend, an educator, or a young reader in your life. Now, on with the show. This week saw a good number of major releases. Let's start with Dear Jackie by Jessica Bagley and illustrated by Aaron Bagley. Though childhood best friends Jackie and Milo, who were born on the same day at the same hospital, are dreading entering middle school, they're comforted by the fact that they have each other. Once the school year begins, however, Jackie struggles to maintain their dynamic as Milo opts to bond with his new soccer teammates. On top of feeling lonely, Jackie endures cruel critiques from her peers about her appearance. Milo's teammates disparage her for dressing like a dude, while female classmates encourage Jackie to change up her style so at least people would know you're a girl. She resolves to give herself a makeover for picture day, but when students ridicule her visible body hair and Milo joins in the jeering, things begin to go downhill for the once close besties. Slice of life vignettes by Jessixa and Aaron Bagley portray Jackie's grappling with issues surrounding puberty, body image, and shifting relationships. Glimpses into Milo's own challenges navigate toxic male environments deepens the graphic novel's authentic representation of kids in social transition. Characters are depicted with varying skin tones, and this book is recommended for ages 8 to 12. Next, A Method for Magic and Misfortune by Craig Kofi Farmer. A hard-working tween obtains magical abilities at an unexpected cost in this endearing fantasy novel by Farmer. Following his single mother's death in a car accident, 12-year-old Marcus looks after his younger sister, hoping to alleviate some of the strain his aunt has been experiencing since the siblings came under her care. When Marcus discovers magic flowing through Grand Park that enables him to conjure money, among other things, it seems as if his family's problems are solved. His abilities catch the eye of community leader Mr. O, the closest thing to a father figure Marcus has had since his physically abusive dad left. Intending to teach Marcus the art of divination, Mr. O enrolls him into a rigorous magical training program. But as Mr. O becomes increasingly suspect, Marcus must reevaluate his priorities and reconsider his values. In a heartfelt novel that examines themes of family and motivation, Farmer empathetically addresses abuse and loss and the hardships one might face in their aftermath, across Marcus's nuanced and thoughtfully rendered first-person perspective. The protagonist's cue as black, and this book is recommended for ages 8 to 12. Next is Pocket Bear by Katherine Applegate and illustrated by Charles Santoso. When haughty former street cat Zephyrina finds abandoned down-on-their-luck toys, she takes them to the apartment where she lives with mother-daughter duo Elizaveta and Dasha, refugees from Ukraine. At night, the family's toy collection awakens, roaming free under Zephyrina's watchful eye and the guidance of her best friend, stuffed teddy Pocket Bear. Thimble-born more than a century ago, Pocket was designed to fit in the uniform pouch of an American soldier and provide comfort in the trenches during World War I. Now the wise Sarge of this home of misfit toys, Pocket readily accepts Zephyrina's newest find. An ursine plush with a mysterious past, which she spotted covered in tomato sauce and pasta behind an Italian restaurant. Via attentive and nuanced renderings of the apartment's unique residents and the humans who care for them, Newbery medalist Applegate weaves a gently sophisticated tale that considers the trauma brought about by war on those forced to endure it. Zephyrina's grudging first-person POV injects humor into tender and eloquent narrative sequences, which illustrator Santoso expertly complements with detailed grayscale illustrations, depicting moments such as Pocket's loving creation and a midnight conference of toys. Across brief yet rousing chapters, this treasure of a book evokes laughter, tears, and introspection in equal measure. This book is recommended for ages 8 to 12. Next up is Split the Sky by Marie Arnold. Arnold wields a fantastical premise to examine the effects of systemic racism in this speculative social justice narrative. 15-year-old Lala Russell is a talented cellist who dreams of pursuing a career in music far away from the sundown town of Davie, Texas. She also possesses a generational gift for premonition, passed down through the black women in her family. Though classmates pressure her to join the school's Black Alliance and hate groups stage counter-protests in response to town diversity initiatives, Lala has no desire to engage in social activism, because there's always some race-based problem to rage, fight, and protest against. When she has a vision of a Black Alliance student being killed, Lala resolves to prevent it, but her grandmother warns her that if she interferes, she could potentially derail the next nationwide civil rights movement. Now, Lala must decide if sacrificing one person for the betterment of others is worth the progress it would bring. Steeped in Black history, tough moral dilemmas, and poignant depictions of contemporary social conflict, this is a thought-provoking journey with plenty of heart and surprises. Fully realized characters and fantasy elements offer a riveting look into one Black teen's struggle to use her voice and harness her magic. This book is recommended for ages 12 and up. And our last book recommendation for this week, Let's Get Together by Randy Colbert. Liberty Perry, who is in foster care, did the math, and her first day of 6th grade is the 10th time she's been the new kid. Though she's used to moving around and adjusting to fit in with ever-changing circumstances, her recent placement with empathetic Joey in Pasadena feels different, and she hopes this move will be her last. Meanwhile, Kenya Norwood is looking forward to spending 6th grade at the top of the social hierarchy with her best friends. But the first day of class brings a shock for both Liberty and Kenya, whose disastrous first meeting and uncanny resemblance becomes the talk of the school. After the girls' mutual dislike escalates to a physical confrontation, Kenya's single father reveals a shocking secret. Liberty and Kenya are twins, and their late mother kidnapped Liberty when they were babies. In this reimagining of the parent trap, author Colbert examines, via the protagonist's strong characterizations across dual third-person POVs, the potential social and emotional effects of navigating the foster care system, alongside nuanced depictions of substance reliance and children managing complex relationships with parents and caregivers. Most characters are Black, and this book is recommended for ages 8 to 12. And closing out this week's episode with some news. The biggest story this week comes from Florida, where the state Surgeon General has announced a plan to end the state mandates for vaccinations. This will heavily affect schools, which is why it is coming up on the Book Fair podcast. This past week, Florida Governor Ron DeSantis and Surgeon General Dr. Joseph A. Ladapo announced that Florida will be the first state to end all vaccine requirements, including for K-12 public schools. Ladapo likened vaccine requirements to slavery. The announcement was met with applause at a press conference. Florida immunizations requirements currently include polio, measles, mumps, rubella, chickenpox, and varicella. The goal of these requirements is to lead to herd immunity for preventable diseases. Currently, diseases like polio and measles are largely eliminated in the United States, due in large part to requirements for vaccines to attend public schools. Dr. Sandra Adamson Freihofer from the American Medical Association released a statement. This unprecedented rollback would undermine decades of public health progress and place children and communities at increased risks for diseases. While there is still time, we urge Florida to reconsider this change to help prevent the rise of infectious diseases that put health and lives at risk. Vaccine denial reached its peak during the COVID-19 pandemic, and today Florida has one of the lowest measles vaccination rates in the country, with 88.1% of people being inoculated against measles. The second part of the story makes the situation more troublesome. The Florida Surgeon General says he doesn't need to study the impact of ending vaccine mandates in the state. Mandates largely affect public schools, which an overwhelming majority of children attend in the state of Florida. As younger students will enter public schools next year, removing these requirements will lead to students without proper protection against easily preventable diseases in a crowded space that they are required to attend for a majority of their waking days. Hopefully, Florida reverses their decision, But with the current administration and RFK Jr. as the controversial head of the Department of Health and Human Services, things are not looking hopeful. Governor DeSantis boasts that Florida is the first state to end these requirements, and we can expect a pattern of other red states following suit. Next, Canada throws its hat in the ring of book bans, only to instantly retract. Initially posted on August 28th, an internal list from Edmonton schools named 200 titles deemed sexually explicit and slated for removal. This follows a new policy from Alberta's education minister set to take effect on October 1st. Edmonton Public School Board Chair Julie Kusiak said the board shares concerns raised by community members and opposes the policy. Quote, "As a result of the ministerial order, several excellent books will be removed from our shelves this fall." End quote. Education Minister Dimitroi Nicolaides admits that the government is aware of this list and will be reviewing it. The list did not differentiate between grade levels, and titles include many that have been banned by groups like Moms for Liberty in the United States. Overall, the wording of the policy and the top-down approach of removing titles is reminiscent of the way that red states in America are attacking public schools and libraries. After the weekend, the first day of school started with empty shelves, with hundreds of titles pulled for review, all at the order of the Alberta government, wanting to remove sexually explicit books and going for the broad, sweeping tactic of pulling any and all titles that may have any content that could be interpreted as explicit until it can be reviewed. A slow and costly process that burdens staff and taxpayers. Before the end of the first school day, the province reversed the decision. Danielle Smith, provincial premier, or the equivalent of a governor or mayor, said that the list of 200 books came out of protest against the policy. Smith defends her stance, saying, quote, "This isn't about banning books. It's about protecting kids from graphic, sexually explicit content that has no place in a classroom." End quote. Her goal aligns with pro-censorship groups in the United States, though she seems more reasonable than those groups like Moms for Liberty. As always, the Book Faire podcast stands on the side of the freedom to read. Communities deserve equal access to books and information, and the people I trust are those that are trained in library sciences and teachers with real-world experience helping young readers discover stories that fit their age of development and reading level. State and federal governments have no place in determining what works best for our children. And ending on some good news. Cell phone bans in schools have led to a surge in library attendance and checkouts. States have been implementing laws around phones in schools, and this was something I consciously left off of news segments for the Book Faire podcast. I was fairly confident that this would be a non-issue with no real impact, either being repealed, rolling back restrictions, or just continuing as a new norm with no change to society and schools as a whole. However, this story caught my eye coming out of Louisville, Kentucky. Jefferson County Public Schools started the school year with a full cell phone ban. The policy requires phones to be put away all day, including during lunch and between classes. School policy has always been that phone use during class was prohibited, so these laws that are taking over in some states sound redundant to me. However, Jefferson County Public Schools have seen a major culture shift. With phones no longer allowed outside of pockets or backpacks, students are checking out library books in record numbers across the school district. School campuses have reported major increases in library usage, with Farnsley Middle School seeing 1,003 checkouts in the month of August, where the same month last year only had 92 checkouts. Conservative estimates put library usage at double normal rates. Central High School had 953 checkouts, up from 575. Ballard High School showed 798 checkouts from 341. Other school districts in Kentucky are seeing similar results. However, JCPS is only the first to publicly release their numbers for August. While statewide laws prohibiting students having cell phones in school seem drastic, 26 states so far have enacted some form of policy to limit their use in classrooms in some way. Time will tell if there will be any notable changes in schools' use of libraries or if this will be isolated and short term. However, the fact that Jefferson County Public Schools saw a district-wide jump in attendance bodes well for other schools seeing similar stories. This will conclude another episode of the Book Fair podcast. If you appreciate the show, check us out on Blue Sky at Book Fair Pod. You can also go to patreon.com/thebookfair. Patreon will always include links to news stories referenced throughout the show. Following is free and no posts are hidden behind a paywall. Of course, the best way to support the show is simply by sharing it with a friend, an educator, or a young reader in your life. Thank you very much for listening, and as always, I'll talk at you next time.